More to Marketing. Welcome to More to Marketing, the podcast that explores marketing, product, and all things business. I'm your host for today, Susan, and we're talking about metaphoric storytelling and how important for brands to really stand out and be authentic and how they can really utilize this superpower. We have a very special guest today who's an expert in this field, Sue Rice. Sue is a world-class marketer who has written the book, Tiny Thunder, Irresistible Messages for an Overwhelming World, the highly acclaimed book about the power of metaphoric storytelling. It's a must read. I'll make sure the details are in the show notes. Her clients have included, and I'm just going to name a few of them because there are so many. So we've got Ericsson, Fiat, General Foods, Gillette, L'Oreal, Lego, Nike, University of California. There's so many. Go to her website. You'll see so many more there too. Nicknamed the female David Ogilvy, Sue is a longtime marketing strategist, professional copywriter, and international communications expert who currently runs her own international email marketing agency. So check that out if you need those services. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. Tell me a bit more about yourself and your journey and how you got into storytelling.
So I don't know where you want to start. It is kind of a long story, but what's interesting about how I got into storytelling is I always sort of followed the value behind it, which is that, you don't have to choose between persuasion and selling and relationship building. And what's great about storytelling is because it's so powerful, it allows you to do both. And you kind of do it both imperceptibly. It's not like hitting people over the head with a hammer with a sales pitch, but it's about kind of entering into the collective dialogue and by doing that, becoming persuasive. And that's something that I've always done. I mean, I started out in the analog world, in the advertising world, where we're doing, I did big brand, advertising campaigns with agencies like Ogilvy and Mather and BBDO. And I feel like I feel like what I've done is I've sort of brought that mentality of storytelling and brand telling into the digital world in a way that is kind of everyone can touch on it. The thing that's interesting about metaphoric storytelling is that we all do it. We don't even know we do it. What's so great about it, it taps into the unconscious. And so that makes it the challenge and makes it why it's so powerful, right? Because metaphoric storytelling, the whole metaphors, do you know that we use metaphors like 6 times in a minute? We're constantly using metaphors, but we're not conscious of them. And so it's bringing that what we're already hardwired to do into the marketing world, if that makes sense.
It does, and it sounds like
that was kind of a mouthful, but
no, it completely makes sense, and it sounds like a lot of the roots of it can come from traditional brand. And if you do the storytelling correctly and it resonates, it can be very powerful because it's natural and innate in a lot of people.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that what has happened, what's interesting is to watch the evolution is, like I said, I started out in sort of a traditional advertising world where we were doing big brand advertising. And then, of course, as the internet moved center stage, we all became really obsessed with metrics and with sort of direct marketing techniques. By the way, neither approach is wrong, but I feel like we lose a little bit by only doing brand and only doing the digital marketing. And so what I like about metaphoric storytelling is it's still it still has that relationship building part, but it's also super persuasive. So you get the results that you want and the metrics that you want. It's this wonderful blend of the two. But what I find with a lot of direct marketing tactics is, you get short-term results, but you're not building the relationship. So in the end of the day, you can be shooting yourself in the foot because you get people to act, but you don't build the relationships. And stories are the way to build a relationship for sure, whether they're personal stories or sharing third-party stories. And if I could say one other thing, if I could interject one other thing, when people talk about storytelling and marketing, almost 99% of the people, the first thing they think of is, oh, yeah, that's great. I'll tell my brand story, right? I'll tell my brand story. And there's nothing wrong with telling your brand story, but that's a really short runway. It's like, just, when you're at the dinner party, you do not want to be sitting next to the person that tells their story, their personal story of how they conquered whatever. You don't want to hear that 20 times. You want to be with someone who's engaging, who shares in conversations they've heard, or tell wonderful historical stories, or what a celebrity did. And that's what I do with metaphoric storytelling. Is I the pool of options of telling the stories comes from life. It comes from social media and movies and books and nature and breaking news. I think what I would like to, I guess what I'd like to kind of remind people is that there's nothing wrong with brand storytelling, but it's just a tiny segment of the possibilities when it comes to storytelling. And the good news about it is not only is it more effective in terms of marketing, it's a lot more fun to do. A
And
lot
it's
more fun.
And it's also how you can get them engaged with it and probably even join. So if you're going to be using more of these digital channels, you can get them to come on board and join you with the storytelling and start to share their own along the way if you've got that type of brand.
That's absolutely right. And it's also for people who have personal brands that it's a way of showing, again, in a way, the word storytelling is probably not the right name. In fact, what I do is I share anecdotes. I share little, like we talk when, if you and I were sitting at a party right now, we'd be doing little snitches and snatches of what's happening in the world and what we saw on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok today, and that's how we talk. So it's much more natural. Um, and and so basically what I'll do is whatever that little anecdote is, I will connect it back up to the product or service that either myself or my client are selling or presenting to people. And it's what's fun about it is the more distant the story is from the product or service, the more fun it is, because it's like, why the heck is she talking to me about training dogs when she sells marketing? Or why is she talking about an earthquake in Colombia or whatever it is? It's like, it could be something so completely apart from what you do, which, by the way, causes a lot of discomfort to marketers who like to be linear about what they do. But it actually is really effective because it's almost like the act of telling that story that's disparate from your product service. It's almost like telling a joke. It's like, oh, that's why she's telling that story. When it's sort of like, oh, I get it now. And it almost becomes an interactive dialogue, even if it's a silent one, between the marketer and the person that they're marketing to. And that's also another really wonderful benefit. But I at the end of the day, I think it comes down to kind of a more universal issue when it comes to marketing. We feel more comfortable presenting things in a linear, conscious way. This is our product and service, and this is what it does for you, and this is, but when in fact 98% of how we behave in life is unconscious. It's below the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of metaphors, because it taps into the power of our unconscious, which is really where all the action's happening. And I understand the discomfort, however, because we have our little charts about what we do and what our audience wants. But the reality is, what's happening is the unspoken, and that's why storytelling, that's why people talk about storytelling, because it is powerful, and we're hardwired for stories,
Mm,
absolutely hardwired as human beings. But when we're sitting around the table plotting out our marketing strategies, it can cause discomfort, right?
agree. And I think for me, one of the powerful storytelling mechanisms I've seen is when some of the large department stores in America have got a history of doing Christmas or doing theming around holidays and bringing it to life, that people are excited to see what the next theme is that they're going to do and how they connect to it. So building
Right,
that legacy of, it's not about that t-shirt that you bought in this department store. It's not about those pair of shoes or that lotion. It's about a storytelling of a moment that gets shared through visuals that doesn't even show any products. And people
right.
then have an
That's right.
emotional connection to it. And every year they build and build on it, that it's so strong. And I think that's a beautiful example of storytelling that I've seen, that I can see is
Right.
very powerful, utilizing traditional but also digital and that metaphoric storytelling overall.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And often that kind of messaging, like I said, the actual power of it is hidden. Like, we're not saying,
Mm.
I'm doing this campaign so that you can connect to this memory. It just happens. And
Yeah.
that's what, when you change, when you share little anecdotes that are, like what I said earlier, part of the collective conversation, you're doing the exact same thing. Instead of like interrupting the conversation with, this is what I have for you, you're saying, hey, let's sit down and share, a joke or a statistic or a fun fact or a meme, or, I mean, just the possibilities for metaphoric storytelling are endless, which is what I like about it. And I'll explain to you why I developed this. So my specialty is email marketing, both inbound and outbound. And and to be honest, I mean, anyone who's listening to this can go to their inbox and you can see it's a disaster there. It's the messaging is stale, it's template, it's copy and paste. You could literally exchange one message and put a new company and a new product service, and it'll sound identical. And so I for many, many years I did customized one-on-one, I wrote email campaigns, ongoing email campaigns for a whole host of people. And I couldn't do it anymore. It was just so, it just didn't feel authentic.
Sounds soul
And
sucking.
it was soul sucking. So the first step I did is, okay, I said, well, maybe what we need to do is interject, certainly for my clients that were building their personal brands, some of their personal stories, which worked to a certain extent, and it does still work to a certain extent. But again, I would run out of stories. Like, if I was sending 2 emails a day for someone, or an email a day, that's 20, it was just a lot. So I said, okay, that's when I started sort of dipping my toe into, why don't I try doing third-party stories and sourcing them from a whole host of places, and seeing if I could link those stories, those little anecdotes, up with what they were selling. And then that's when I stumbled across this method. And I see the metrics. It works really, really well. The open rates shot up, we sold a lot more, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just because there was a high entertainment value. It was unique. It feels fresh. It feels authentic. I mean, there's just, and it's dipping into that unconscious that um is so incredibly powerful, because people's guard goes down when I get into your inbox and start talking about, you know a story. It could be anything. It could be a fable. It could be, um it could really be anything. I mean, I read a story the other day that I love, that I'm going to use actually, about how the first wife of John Lennon, when he divorced her, he didn't give her very much money, right? And so she wanted to sell some of the memorabilia, some of the letters that he had written her. And so she put them on the market because she needed money. And Paul McCartney bought them, right? And 2 days after he bought for a huge sum of money, and 2 days after he bought it, he sent her all the letters back, and he said, never sell your memories. Right? And
Yeah.
you could use that story for a zillion different products and services. And it's a beautiful story, and people would read it. You with me? That's the kind of thing. And you could use it not just in email, you can use it in a social media post or in a blog post. So you can use it. I specialize in email because it's like this perfect amount of copy to do those kind of stories. But you can use it in a myriad of ways. You can use it in product demonstrations. You can, for example, that story, you could do it for a travel agency, could use that, say, don't forget, the thing that's most important in life is memories, and that's what we create for you, and this is what this package will do, right? You would be so, but you could do it with so many different other types of products as well. So yeah, so I feel like, and the world is filled with gems of stories. They're just everywhere.
There are, and movies show that to us as well, and through music and
Movies,
everything. And
music lyrics, celebrity stories. I mean, it just goes history, fun facts, stats, nature. Nature's a wonderful source of miracles and surprising things, and then the personal stories are also always super powerful. It just goes on, and which is what makes it fun, because sometimes marketing isn't that fun when you're doing the stale old stuff.
particularly if you're sticking just to those brand guidelines and the brand story as well, it gets very stale very fast.
Yeah, and it gets stale for the person who's receiving it too. That's what people don't get. If that you can pretty much bet that if it's stale for you, guess what? Your audience is thinking it's pretty stale too.
Exactly. I love that you've been sharing a bit about what people think and the emotiveness behind storytelling. But are you able to discuss a bit more about the psychological principles behind the metaphoric storytelling and, from your point of view, how they influence consumer perception and behavior?
Okay, so one of the things that I think is probably so here's what I think. I think the thing that is the most scarce in today are two things: people's attention and people's trust,
Mm,
right? So let's
yep.
start with the attention first. What's interesting about stories, and it's scientifically, this is not my opinion, this is been proven over and over again, is that when you tell a story, people remember it. The memory factor of it is because what you're doing is you're activating, like, not so if you show a stat, right? If you show a classic PowerPoint presentation that's left brain, just about the rational, you trigger maybe, I think, two regions of the brain. If you tell a story, it's like fireworks in your brain. They're like nine regions are lit up, right? And that's psychologically is what is why people retain stories so much. They do not, I actually tell this in my book. I love this. So I told this story. I taught a class about communications at, I live here in France at a private French school near where I live, to a group of high school students. And the story was basically um, about how important communications is, and it was it was actually about a guy whose young wife got pregnant, and he was no longer able to impregnate his wife, and so he's like, so the guy came into the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, he says to the doctor, it's a miracle. And then the doctor tells him this story about, you know um the fact that um, if you shoot a bird with an empty gun, you're not going to kill the bird. And basically what he was trying to say is someone else shot the bird.
Yeah, the milkman came by.
there was another, right. And and so I told this story kind of about how communications is really, really important. Oh no, and then the other story that I had was that the guy said, I don't understand. There was another one where the guy said, I don't understand why my wife got pregnant. I took the pill every day.
I like that one.
And I took the pill every day. And then I was saying, that was a miscommunication. You need to be really clear about your communication. And so I met one of these high school students 10 years later in Paris, just by randomly. I was at a cafe, and she said, I loved your course. I don't remember anything you taught me except for that one story. Those stories that you told. So that's what people remember. They remember the stories, right?
Definitely
They
agree with
remember
that.
the stories. And so psychologically, it's not very intelligent not to leverage the power of them.
Yep.
The how to do it is a whole other question, which we probably should talk about. But it's super, super important to do that. And it's, like I said, it's almost unconscious. It's under the iceberg. It's under that rational stuff and it makes us feel uncomfortable. I have had clients who are uncomfortable with it and they don't want to do it. And I respect that. But they're doing themselves a disservice.
It's an opportunity that they're missing out on by not having that extra connection layer, isn't it?
That's right. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So yeah, so that's, I don't know if that answers your question about the psychology behind it. But so that's the story piece, but then there's the metaphor piece, right? And the metaphors, the power behind a metaphor is you are explaining what something is by juxtaposing it to something that it isn't. And that is something that we as human beings do uniquely. Like, apes and monkeys and all that, they communicate, but they don't. The one thing that we do that makes us distinct is thinking metaphorically. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically combining, by doing metaphoric storytelling, I'm combining and metaphors are so, so strong because they allow us to see clearly what it is that we're communicating by juxtaposing it to something that it isn't, and what I'm doing with metaphoric storytelling is I'm essentially blending two of the most powerful communications tools that we have as human beings together. And it works a treat, and people will love you for it. And the other thing that's great is you'll look different because everyone else is doing the exact same thing. So what we looping back to what we talked about, the attention and the trust. So what by using metaphoric storytelling, you can get attention in a world that is completely inundated with screaming, with people yelling at the top of their lungs and saying the same thing over again. And you just slice right through that with a metaphoric story, because people will, oh yeah, that's different. I'd love to hear what's that all about? Because people don't do it.
Exactly.
And then the next thing is that by doing that over and over again and doing that in different contexts and doing that on different platforms, you build trust, because you're the one that everyone wants to sit next to at the dinner table because you're the fun one, and you're the witty one, and you're the one who's telling all these wonderful little anecdotes, not droning on and on about how you started your company, but you're talking about this and that, and you're sort of polyvalent, you have all these different kind of facets, but it all comes back to the same thing. the magic in metaphoric storytelling is how you bring it back to what you are actually trying to sell. Because at the end of the day, we're selling stuff, right? We're marketing. We're not just entertaining. So it's the magic is how you do that. And what I do is I back into it. I basically say, these are the things you want to communicate. What stories can we use to illustrate the pain points you solve, or the challenges you solve, or the benefits you offer, or the dreams that you fulfill, or the nightmares that you help people to avoid, or the myths that they believe in. There's all, and basically, so you have this long list of things that you want to communicate, and then you back into an array of stories that will help you communicate that.
And are you able to give maybe one or two examples of how you've done this and how powerful it's been? What's one of your most favorite ones that you happen to have done?
I'm trying to think.
Or is there too many?
There are so many, and I want to do something that I'm not, because obviously most of my clients, I have NDAs.
Or maybe one that you've seen that you think's done a good job.
So, I mean, you can look at metaphoric storytelling that other people have done. So, for example, if you look at someone like Steve Jobs, he was a master at it. So when he introduced the iPod, right, he could have said, we have the X technology and Y this, et cetera, et cetera. But what he said is, with the iPod, you will have 1001 songs in your back pocket. That's a metaphor, instead of saying, so it's like he cut through all of that. There are, I think that there's there's just millions of different ways. It's interesting. Scientists actually often use metaphors to explain what they're doing as well. So there's just a whole host of ways that you can present things in a lexicon and with a description that people understand. Let me give you a historical story. So I don't know if you remember the Great Train Robbery in the 1920s. It's like 5,000 centuries ago now.
I've definitely seen movies based on it.
Yes. So when he pulled that off, so the guy, the story is, they stopped the train and they basically robbed everything on the train, like millions of dollars, etc. Here's a great example of a metaphoric story. He said he considered himself the Michelangelo of great train robberies. Okay. So everyone gets that metaphor, right? So Michelangelo, and he was like, no, I think he actually said it was my Sistine Chapel. I think he's what he said. So everyone gets that metaphor, and there's nothing they are completely far apart. He's a train robber, and Michelangelo was probably one of the world's greatest artists, right? But you get that comparison immediately. They're both at the apex of their career. They're both artists at what they do. They're both brilliant at what they do. And the Sistine Chapel was the apex of Michelangelo's career. And the Great Train Robbery was, I don't remember his name, was the apex of his. So that's another great example. I mean, it goes on and on. So you can, and people do that. People often, I often see it on, oddly enough, one of the platforms that uses metaphoric storytelling all the time is LinkedIn. You go through your stream on LinkedIn, people are constantly using it. And they'll compare, a winning baseball team with, their product, there's just all kinds of ways of using those kind of comparisons to make your point. And it doesn't have to be a story. It can be just a label, like, we're the Sistine Chapel of X. That's just a label. People will get it immediately. It needs to be
Exactly.
believable, by the way.
Or even just acronyms like MVP, if we do the sports analogy, that
Absolutely.
people will understand exactly what that is straight away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that, so the tiny thunder can be as small as 2 words and as big as, 2 pages. Those my person, so it can be as small as an actual metaphor, or it can be a metaphoric story that requires some telling. So there's quite a spectrum on that, I think.
Definitely. And when a business decides, you know what, I love this idea of metaphoric storytelling, I want to start, I've been doing boring things, we need to change it up a little bit. I know you've given some examples of start with what are the pain points, what does your product dream fulfill, but where else could they have a starting point to be able to start their journey for storytelling?
So I think the best way is what I just said. I think the best way to do it is to, which, by the way, you should be starting, even if you're not using metaphoric storytelling, is, understanding in depth the challenges people see. I separate challenges out from pain points. So challenges to me are things like, I don't have enough time, I don't have good enough systems, I don't have the knowledge, that kind of thing. Pain points are how we feel about those things: frustration, confusion, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. And so I I would be very detailed about both those. And then, of course, the benefits that people seek, which are essentially the opposite side of the coin, right? So the benefits are a lack of those challenges and a lack of those pain points, etc. Then I also like to create what people want to hear and what people need to hear. I like to do something around the myths that people believe that hold them back. I like to also identify dream scenarios and nightmare scenarios, like what happens if they actually fix this and what happens if they never can fix it. So I kind of want to create a very in-depth profile for each of my audiences, because most clients don't have just one audience, right? So
Agree.
because and so that will change. And then once that's happened, then you can use that as sort of a starting point to finding stories. So there's 2 ways. I don't know if this is going into too depth. You can tell me if it is, but there's two
I'm
ways of
interested to
doing
know
it.
this. So,
So one way of doing it, so you have that sort of audience profile, is what I would call it, in the background. And then you have 2 ways of tackling this. You can look at that audience profile and say, you know what, I want to talk about that challenge. Let's just say lack of time. So then we back into the stories. What stories do I know that's out there in the universe that people would be interested in? And like, there's a million sources: TED Talks, history, celebrity lives, movies, books, fables. It's fun facts. I mean, there's at least 10 or 12 different sources that you could say, how can I find those, a story that illustrates that I can tell, and then link into the fact that I can help you with time. So that's one avenue. You could also start with a story. Maybe there's a story that you love from whatever, it doesn't matter, and you figure out that's unrelated. The more unrelated it is, remember we talked about, the more that comparison surprises, the better it is.
it stands
Don't,
out.
if you've heard of the metaphor before, don't use it. If you, whatever the metaphor is, if you've heard it before, do not use it, because it's already old. It's like, oh my God, don't repeat that to me. It needs to be fresh. It needs to be a comparison that people have never linked together before. But you can start with a story, a personal story, a third-party story, something you read in the newspaper today or something you read online, and figure out how to connect it with that tapestry, that audience profile tapestry that you've set up. And then what I do, I mean, I have libraries of these, but what I normally do is I have a big tapestry of a big list, a brainstorming list. So, it's a process that's going on all the time. Because because stories come into our lives dozens of times a day. And so, you can kind of keep a library of ideas, of brainstorming ideas that you can link back to. So it can come from either the story first, linking it to the audience profile, or grabbing something in those challenges or those pain points and backing into a story. You can go either way. If that makes sense.
It does. And I love that it's so flexible to be able to utilize this type of metaphoric storytelling as well, depending on what your product or service is. So you can use either of those to help the starting point.
Or both.
Exactly.
Or both.
Yeah.
So here's something that actually hasn't been public. It'll be first here on your podcast. So, to be totally transparent, people love this idea. They love using metaphoric stories, but they struggle with creating them. Okay. Because there's a bit of an art to it, right? It's a muscle, I guess. There's a better way to describe it that some people just haven't developed. So to help people with that, I've actually created an app.
Amazing.
A Tiny Thunder app where the process that I just described is in the background. So you can, and the app will allow you to, for the moment, will allow you to create social media posts, blog posts, or emails. I will probably expand it later to presentations and all of that, but for the moment, that's the base of it. And it's in beta right now, and it'll probably be available at the beginning of 2025. So
amazing.
So to help people. So basically it's push button and it does it all for you.
I love that. And that's a great way for everyone to start as well. Use the app, start understanding how it goes together, stretch those muscles.
Exactly.
And then over time, you'll be able to do that yourself naturally and be able to recognize it as well when you see it out there and see those opportunities that you can bring it back in.
So what's great about it is it's kind of, you can do a little bit of both with the app, right? So if you have a story, and the way I've done it so it's super, super easy. Like you can literally, if you see a story, you can open up the app and you can just like say it verbally. And then the app will give you the output. You will write the story. And it's, as you know, I'm a professional copywriter. So I've been super, super demanding. It's like really high there. It's really high quality. It's like, you might need to tweak it a tiny bit, but it's really high quality.
Amazing.
So you can kind of interact with it and basically you can decide what the input is what I'm saying, and then but you don't have to. I think the thing that people struggle with is the actual creation of it, because the metaphoric story has three parts. You have the story or the anecdote, then you have why you're telling that. So you have like the bridge between the story and your product and service. And that's where people have a struggle. So that's why I said, maybe I just create something that helps people do that. So you just pick the story, or you pick the subject that you want to write a story about. So for example, if you picked a challenge, like people don't have enough time, what happens is the app will give you 10 different story options coming from different things, and you just pick it, and then it will be written for you. And obviously you can tweak it however you want, but it literally reduces the time by, I can't even, like, by days.
Exactly. And again, it's just that starting point. And then if you need something that's even more creative or more unique, then people can go to you to be able to do that for them.
Absolutely.
So it's a fantastic, almost like a business card for you on the services that you can do, and then you can actually make a unique version of it. So come to me.
That's right. So, and I do that. I mean, I've seen it. I have again, I won't say the name, but I have a client that's quite well known, who does business coaching, and she started using this, I guess I want to say July of this year, so not that many months, maybe. And she's had literal, and she's was doing really, really well before, but she's having record-breaking months,
Amazing.
record-breaking months. So um because it's just, take the one thing, there is a bit of a transition. So like if you're doing email marketing to a list and they're used to seeing boring stuff,
Yeah, you don't want to shock
there's
them.
like they're like, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's sort of like, hang on, I got a whiplash here. So yeah, so but I think that but don't forget, it can be used for everything. It can be used in sales pitches, it can be used in product demonstrations, it can be
Mm.
used, there's so many other ways that it can be used. It can be used in ads, Facebook ads. It can be used it can be used
Everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah, so it's not just, um but I think, I'm obviously biased because I do email marketing. I've always thought it's the strongest weapon anyone has.
Well, you don't have much time before they click out of it. If you don't have a strong subject line or whatever it is, they're not even going to bother giving you any time or space in their inbox, are they?
That's right.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's sort of, hopefully I've answered the questions.
You have. I've got my last two that I always ask, so forgive me, but I ask everyone these. What excites you the most about metaphoric storytelling?
I think what excites me the most, and it's going to sound a bit immodest, so my apologies in advance, but um, I feel like it's really unique. And that is the part that excites me the most, is because it's hard to find things out there. It just feels like we're doing the same thing over and over again, the same advice, the same. And while storytelling obviously is a subject that people have talked about for a long time, metaphoric storytelling isn't. And there are very, very, very few people that are either talking about it or doing it. And that really excites me. So it's like a fresh avenue that people can take to really, really bring their businesses to the next level. And on that, of all the things that, I mean, I'm a words girl. I'm all about, I believe words are power and words are wealth. But what I'm even more excited about, because I believe it's the keys to the kingdom, the keys to freedom, is helping people become successful entrepreneurs and successful business people. And I feel like the metaphoric storytelling is an absolutely immeasurably powerful tool to help you leapfrog in whatever industry you're in. Everyone can use it. And that, me helping people build their businesses, makes me really, really excited.
I love that. And I think that that's one of the things that will help you be super successful. Not that you aren't already, but that you have that passion behind it because
Oh, yeah.
and you're wanting to freely share a lot of this information as well. So thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I feel like that if I could just say, that's the other thing that's so wonderful about Tiny Thunder. The way you would use it and the way I would use it are totally different. So it's unique, but not proprietary and kind of behind walls. It's like,
Mm.
what is so nice about it is it can be executed in so many different ways that it's less of a prescriptive formula and more of a kind of a philosophy
It's
of
very
how,
organic.
right? Yeah, and that piece of it makes me really excited because there are way too many templates out there. We need to stop that.
I agree. And there's so many just copied over and over again. And then sometimes you can tell the errors as well.
Oops.
I have my very last question.
Okay.
What
Drum
brand?
roll.
Yeah. What brand, any brand at all, best represents you and why?
Oh my gosh.
Your personal brand.
So I've got to say, I've already brought him up, but I've got to say maybe not Apple today, but Steve Jobs Once Upon a Time Apple.
Yep.
Because what I like about, again, I feel like what he did or what he was trying to do represents what I'm trying to do, which is so what he was trying to do, he was really clever, like with at the very beginning with the 1984 ad and all of that. What he was trying to do is he was trying to intersect with the values of a particular generation who whose parents had been brought up in the 50s and the 60s, and it was very, sort of industrial and, very hierarchical. And he was trying to tap into a set of values versus forcing people. It was him going to them versus them coming to him. When we were
He was
talking
bridging
about
that gap, wasn't he?
but and he did it through storytelling. So one of the things that I didn't say at the beginning, I came to Europe many years ago, and I was part of a 4-person team running BBDO Europe, and I was their communications director, and we created a set of what we called future studies, that because we had sort of like this network of really, really smart, creative people, but they were like all working in their own silos, right? So we tried to figure out something that would bring them together. And we created these future studies where they kind of had an input, all the different agencies from all the different countries had an input. But what I was doing, I did not, it wasn't the classic PowerPoint, there are the X number of people. It was a story. I was telling a story about men. I was telling a story about women. I was telling a story about youth. And it was the early days of Tiny Thunder, basically, because it was basically telling these companies, you need to come to them. This is their story. You need to connect with their story. And that's exactly what I believe Tiny Thunder allows you to do. It allows you to connect to their story rather than forcing them to come to yours, right?
Mm.
And I feel like so that's the value that's super, super important to me, because and and the great thing about it is it's not a value. It's not just a value. It actually helps you market better. That you actually get better performance. That's what people don't get, is that it actually, by doing that, by kind of letting go of, they have to come into my universe, is when you open up your own.
That's very powerful. And I love that connection with the original version of Steve Jobs as well, and what you've created and how you feel about it too. So thank you so much for sharing that. I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah. And I like how, I mean, Apple doesn't even deserve to be, it was like almost died. And the reason it didn't die was because of that.
Exactly, the connection.
The brand and that connection was stronger than the financials. Now it's totally changed now. That's why I say the old Apple.
Yes.
It's totally changed now. But it's funny, those values, people still connect with it. People still like to think of themselves as selfish, that Apple allows them to have the utmost in self-expression and all of that. And it's kind of a myth at this point, because to be honest, to me, Apple, and it's not that different anymore, but that's the power of storytelling. That's the power of connecting audience's terms, not on your terms. And what's funny is how few companies actually do that.
So true, so true. And there's so much to learn. I'm going to do a quick recap right now. So do listen in case I miss anything. So today we actually talked about how metaphoric storytelling can really enhance your brand and actually help you connect better with your audiences. It's not just about selling, putting out a brand story, being boring, copying competitors and doing the same repeat thing over and over again, the same ad, just changing a color or whatever it is over and over again. It's about actually creating a story that makes sense in a way that you wouldn't expect it to. And that's where the metaphoric piece comes in, where you can use anecdotes, memes, all sorts of different tricks, I suppose you might call it, and magic to be able to connect your brand in a way that they don't expect it, but in a way that actually excites them when you pull it together. But you're just going to make sure you also follow your values and make sure that it is true to your brand. So you don't go too far off to the side, but you're still in the same park, that it connects, because it's still about a bit of persuasion, storytelling, and value, and making sure they all come together. Because what you're trying to do when you're doing metaphoric storytelling is tapping into that unconsciousness, having that power that goes behind it, and having it as a very powerful message. Because it's not about always doing linear things, it's about trying new things. The perfect metaphor we got today was the iceberg. So don't think about just the tip of the iceberg, but think about all the pieces that could be below this, how you could be unique and fresh and go about it in a different way. Because let's face it, there's so many competitors out there for every different industry, field, whatever you call it. You really need to stand out, and attention and trust are scarce. So it's important to make sure that you do as much as you can to build that attention and trust in a way that is authentic. And that's where metaphoric storytelling can come in and make you have a bit of fun along the way too. We're hardwired to understand stories and to be able to want to share them and interact with them and connect with them. So this is a perfect way to just tap into that other side of the brain and use it more powerfully than a generic message that you might have traditionally done. And this is why that juxtaposition of that opposite to what you're doing can really stand out. And that's how the magic comes together. Now, there's two ways that you can approach this. You can either have a story that you're wanting to bring in, or you could have some other ideas and suggestions about your customers that you're trying to maybe solve for or understand better. That could be pain points. You might have a product and you know what it can fulfill for their dreams or the benefits they could have. Utilize those kinds of different thinking methods. Bring up a big lot of different metaphors and anecdotes that fit in. Bounce them around with your team. See which ones really fit, which ones make you laugh, which ones give you joy, which ones have emotions that you think are different, that you've never seen in market, that you can then try. And you can reuse a lot of these in all different types of channels. And that's how you can stand out. So these can be used literally everywhere, from emails, socials, print advertising, radio, you name it. And the power's already been shown to us. Movies, music, all of these have been using this time and time again to make us feel. So of course it is natural for us to then bring it into any type of promotions that we might be doing as well. People want to be connected, but just remember that when you are pulling together all these different antidotes and suggestions, that you do have different audiences. There is no company that has one audience, cookie cutter, it fits all. Look at that, see if you've got some other opportunities that you can test and learn. And again, have some fun with it. Because what people want to hear and what people hold back on, don't have the fear. Try it, see how it goes, and build that magic, because it can really help you. And it might be a bit daunting to start with. There's a lot of people out there that are used to doing linear marketing, not wanting to deviate, wanting to do the traditional way only. But if you make yourself stand out and do something a little bit different, and don't do it straight away, just make sure you build to it as well. Got to really point that one out. You can create something that is powerful. And if you need a bit of help to start along the way, Tiny Thunder has an app that will be coming out, and that can help you along the journey. So once you're starting to build out these metaphoric storytelling, You can then stretch that muscle, learn how to do it, and then build it more yourself. Anything further to add, Sue?
That's perfect. Thank you. Lovely wrap up.
Thank you so much. I've appreciated having you here, and I've learned so much myself, and I'm sure everyone else has too. Now, we will have all the details for Sue in the show notes, including links to her book and also to the website, so you'll be able to know when the app comes out so you can download it straight away and start using it. Everyone else, thanks for tuning in to More to Marketing. Don't forget to like, to follow, and then you'll be able to hear some more fabulous guests. More to Marketing.